When I finally hung up my footy boots, having no footy to worry about meant I could pursue other interests, one of those being architecture. Now, I've been involved in a number of residential projects and smaller commercial builds, so I've come across a number of architects in my time. And let me tell you, from my experience, the very best architects are passionate, they're articulate, they're visionary, and perhaps most importantly, not short of an opinion or two. In this series, Designing Dreams, I meet some of New Zealand's very best architects and visit their favourite Kiwi homes. Big, small, old, new, all sorts of amazing houses all over the country. Along the way, we'll talk about the big housing issues like affordability and sustainability and what the future of the New Zealand house just might be. Plus, I'm always on the lookout for ideas and inspiration for my own projects. So I get the feeling we're going to learn plenty, we'll enjoy ourselves, and we'll get the inside word on what it takes to design dreams.
We're at Sumner, where I grew up. My bedroom was in the house behind me, and I was born with one leg, just random error, really. I think having one leg really made me pretty stubborn. You know, I tried to do everything that other people could do and try and do it better, really. I went to Canterbury University and did a really poor degree. I mean, I was a dreadful student. It was the 1960s and there were a lot of distractions. And also, I was surfing a lot, so there were very many distractions. I was a bit uncertain what to do, but I was living in a big apartment in the city with a bunch of people, and one of them had moved to the new liberal arts building. And it came on the news that that very building that he'd moved into had got an Institute of Architects award. I said, well, should be able to do better than that. And he said, well, why don't you? And so I thought, okay, yeah. Climbed on my surfboard that was bolted on the top of the car, roped on the top of the car, shook my fist at Christchurch, said I'm never coming back here, and drove north. Stubbornness is certainly a characteristic of mine, but I think the commitment, of which stubbornness is probably a part, is a critical part of making buildings.
You may not know his face, but there's a good chance you've been in a Pip Cheshire designed house, building, or public space. Pip's passion and tenacity is legendary. Founding some of New Zealand's leading architectural practices, he's been at the top of his game for decades. From the Britmart development in downtown Auckland, to theatres, cultural spaces, and high-end homes. Pip's known for retaining heritage while delivering award-winning architecture. And we're in central Auckland to visit the first of 3 of his favourite New Zealand homes. Well, Pip, we're in a very famous part of Auckland, famous street on Ponsonby Franklin Road. And all the houses are pretty posh now, but they're all mainly villas.
Yeah, look, what we're seeing is a transformation of the villa in about 1,000 different ways. All of the houses on the street, there is not one that hasn't been greatly manipulated. Double height spaces and so forth.
And you're okay with that? Because
yeah. No, look, I think it's great. I think, if anything, the great fear is the kind of desire by the heritage crew to kind of freeze dry them. And, you know, it's a losing battle because you look at all of these houses, none of them look like when they were built. I do think there is a place for demolishing a building that's not in great shape. I think there is a responsibility in what you put back there, though.
Here, that responsibility has been taken on by architect Marshall Cook. It's his take on a new urban house, one that doesn't stand out as being different, at the same time, one that responds to changing times especially for families.
I think it fits into the Franklin Road streetscape really well. And I think Marshall's probably one of the best residential architects in the country. What he's doing with these bits of steel up here underneath the louvers is mimicking the way that a window is assembled in the villas. Even though the materials are different, the form is different, what there is detail. If you walk past here and you stop outside of a villa, then you see the way that the rafters poke out underneath the roof, the way that around the window there's little mouldings and so forth. So he's doing the same thing, but with contemporary materials.
Oh, it's certainly pretty funky and pretty cool. Should we go inside and have a look?
Let's go.
It's said there's a common reaction when entering a Marshall Cook house for the first time: surprise and delight.
One of the things that's really interesting about this space is the way that it sits between these two pavilions, you might call them, but actually they're almost houses in their own right. You know, if you look at that end wall up there, you see the weatherboards on the inside of the house.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's saying that's a house of its own. Here we've got these beautiful big doors that can roll across and shut that space out.
Wow.
And so you can have two bits of the family who meet in the middle here in this great space with a kitchen, sitting space, and then opening out here onto this terrace. I think that this is a really great model for the way in which our families are evolving. The idea of the sort of nuclear family where the kids go and never come back, it's kind of a dead thing now, the difficulty of housing for our kids. So here, this accommodates kids. It could be, you know, kids and children over here.
Yes.
Grandparents up here, they all meet in the middle. So, it's, you know, it's a really interesting model. In contrast to that garden room in there, in here, it's much more enclosed and softened, and the materials are all doing that. They're all, you know, there's a lot more timber on the walls, the timber of the bookshelves and so forth. They're all things which are making it feel warmer and softer.
It's like a den, isn't it? It feels like a little snug.
But then it has this lovely connection sideways back out into the courtyard garden. And so we go up those stairs and we'll be kind of leaving the hubbub of the family and retreating back into the private zone. What a beautiful room. It's the end of the journey, from the street, through the forecourt, into the social space, into the quietness of the library space, then back up here, and then just, boom, out again.
Yeah.
To steal a rugby theme, this house is a game of two halves, two journeys really. The second half of the house is not used that much by the present owner, but it does offer plenty of carefully designed options for a bigger family.
This is the second pavilion. The two rooms can open up and join, so that you've got little kids, they can be tucked in there. You know, you come over here and you kind of connect back down to the
Yeah, see,
family space below.
I really like that. That's cool. So if you're up here and you wanted to send a message, you just open the door and away you go.
Yeah, put the coffee on. And then the little workspace just, again, tucked up here. So it's a bit like the main bedroom, you know, that you go on this journey, that you come up the stairs and you come around here and you come into here and then you come into here.
Yeah.
And at the very end, you sit up there in that little chair and you've got that release back into the wider city again.
Yes.
So it's kind of this journey that you're being offered all the time.
Pip's respect for the work of Marshall Cook is infectious. Both architects are empowered by these ideas of how we integrate social and private spaces and how that adds to the quality of our lives. In Auckland's rapidly increasing high-density suburbs, Cook's house may just be pointing the way forward.
The challenge, you know, as a city is trying to develop some sense of continuity, some sense of heritage, but still allowing growth and replacement of building stock that's not in great shape. So they may be different in shape, different in appearance, different in character, but somehow the values are repeated so that the building fits into the neighbourhood.
Yes.
And that's a really interesting challenge.
It sure is.
I'm really looking forward to more of Pip's examples of modern urban housing, plus seeing work showcasing the breadth of his extraordinary career. Pip Cheshire may have started life in Christchurch as a one-legged, surf-mad political science student turned hippie, but his journey north led to one of the brightest architectural careers in New Zealand. It's seen him become a leader, a teacher, a city maker, and a visionary. One of his most famous and successful projects has been the thriving hub of Britmart. Nine blocks of designer boutiques, eateries, bars, retail and offices set in and around some of the city's oldest buildings.
Britmart's built over the top of a rail station. It's very busy. And so you get this great surge of people coming up from here. It sits at the bottom of Queen Street, so it has all of that sort of people coming in and out. The ferries are just diagonally over the road, so there's a large number of people travelling by ferry. In pre-COVID times, we had cruise ships and so forth, and so it's a very active space.
Such a fabulous space. I can remember many moons ago when it used to be the downtown bus terminal.
Yeah.
And it was an absolute dive, right? And it was somewhere, you know, you virtually didn't go during the day, but certainly
That's right.
not at night. But now it's quite amazing.
Yeah.
But what I want to know is, what was your role in designing this?
I guess I was known as a kind of master plan architect. We would just gather together all the drawings of the existing buildings and then try and figure out how they were going to be used. You know, what would work commercially. And so I drew the square out here. I probably drew 50 times.
Interestingly, Britmart was originally Point Britmart, a high peninsula stretching out into the harbour. This large area of land was reclaimed in the 1880s for Auckland's waterfront.
You had the wharf, and then you had all of these buildings around here, which were all warehouses. And so that's meant that these warehouses have gone through all sorts of uses. So they've gone through from warehouse to banks to people squatting in here, all sorts of stuff. It was tough territory. So, you know, it's a pretty unsavoury bit of the city.
In 1994, the Auckland City Council bought the whole 6.5 hectare site and called for tenders for redevelopment and long-term management.
They said, who's going to run this project at Britmart? And I said, I will. And the city said, well, you're managing director of JSMAX, you're an adjunct professor at university, you can't be director in charge of Britmart, something's got to go. We'll be back in half an hour, you tell us what's going to go. I offered my family. I said, well, you know, I could sacrifice a family if that would help. That was a fairly stony reception to that.
Pip had to leave JSMAX, where he'd led over 150 employees, and took on Project Britmart. With no office and only 5 staff, it was the beginning of the biggest heritage restoration project ever undertaken in New Zealand history. But everything worked out brilliantly. Britmart has energised downtown Auckland and become the new beating heart of the city.
Each of the buildings around the perimeter had various levels of heritage protection on them. And that was argued in the Environment Court, that the construction of these didn't necessarily mean the demolition of those buildings.
Which is fantastic, right?
Exactly.
So we're keeping part of the history of Auckland,
Absolutely.
and that's really important because it's really easy to tear stuff down.
Absolutely.
But then you can't build it again, right?
Exactly, yeah.
What's really amazing about this place is you've got the harbour there, right? So once we get rid of the ugly ports of Auckland and we move the port, which hopefully that'll happen sooner rather than later, this area is going to go from being amazing to next level, right?
Yeah.
isn't it?
Absolutely. The aim of the project really is to create a new part of the city, a quarter of the city, and to make that linkage between the harbour and Midtown. How can you take these city blocks and occupy and develop those in order to enliven it and make it a really interesting and dense, well-used bit of the city? What you've got to do is reduce its scale to human scale. You're looking for those small moments where people can be pedestrians without being threatened by cars, that they can wander around and they have these really intense discoveries. So you walk around a corner and, whoa, there's an outdoor fireplace, or down there, this lovely little dessert restaurant. And that's what we're trying to do here. It's what we've got to do in Auckland. The great art of making a city is to let people relate to each other. And that's what Britmart is founded on.
Never one to turn down an interesting project. During the development of Britmart, Pip took on another huge challenge in central Auckland, that being Q Theatre. Now, it was completed in 2011, but Pip's involvement, well, it began far earlier. Pip was always a passionate supporter of the exciting Watershed Theatre, but suddenly in 1996, it was closed for the America's Cup. That closure, coming so soon after the axing of the Mercury Theatre, was almost a death blow to Auckland's theatre community.
Watershed had been absolutely critical in providing a theatre space that allowed all sorts of experiments to take place. And so for 4 or 5 years, that whole theatre community and all of the energy and initiative that had focused around that was homeless. And the city felt a really strong commitment to providing a home. My first work was looking at a variety of sites, and I guess I looked at about 10 or 15 of them around the city. And I lobbied quite strongly for this one because we worked quite hard to see how we could make use of the heritage buildings on Queen as a sort of front door, and then build over what was an old City Council garage here in order to provide this performance space. The goal was to make a place that felt like it had been here for a number of years. I mean, we could have just taken this space here and treated it as raw kind of geometry, if you like, and flashed it up, made it into something it's not at the moment. But that continuity was really important, a sense that it's been part of the city for, I don't know, 100 years or so.
Like Britmart, Pip's clever reuse of what's there already gives the theatre a real connection with the city's ongoing history.
These things are kind of money in the bank, all this decorative stuff. Where that beam starts heading off over to the outside wall, we've just left it there. They give something for the eye to linger on, but they also tell something about the story of the building.
Although Pip's ideas for the foyer centre around heritage values, inside, the theatre itself needed to be a game changer. Modern, easy to use, and flexible.
Over here, we're seeing some of the machinery that makes this theatre work. For example, sitting underneath that balustrade up there, you'll see there's a beam. In fact, that's a whole piece of floor, which can lower down here and join up with this floor over here, and bring an audience right here. So you can have seating just sitting right here, really intense relationship with performers. And so that relies on these big cables here that are all part of the mechanical equipment to lift the floor up and down. We might think of the space really as a machine. Our brief was to be able to reconfigure the theatre to any one of 16 different configurations by 4 people in 4 hours. That was bearable for a company setting out. It was organised really to provide many options as possible for performers, designers, directors and producers and so on. People can lean over those balustrades, hands on the balustrades, and the performer's just there. They're what, 6 metres away, 7 metres away? So there's a really intense relationship with that. What you're playing with is the experience of the total theatre, not just the people on stage, but the relationship of audience to audience. Just out of the corner of your eye, being able to see somebody clapping or throwing back their head and laughing or crying, that is a critical part of the performer's experience of acting.
There is no doubt that Q revolutionised the way performers and audiences can come together. In the last decade, it cemented its place in the hearts of Auckland's theatregoers. Its brilliant, flexible nature assures a home and future for many years to come.
I feel very strongly about Q. This building is here because of the blood, sweat and tears of the theatre community. And so, for me, it represents a major opportunity and a major success in working in the city.
Pip Chesir might seem like a man of contradictions. He's a surfie who has built and run large architecture firms, an ex-hippie charged with creating the new heart of our largest city. He's a painter, a professor, an activist, and a politician. This stubborn kind of fellow is up for any challenge. His life education began at university in Christchurch in the 1960s, when the city was a hotbed of art and ideas. Canterbury University was built in stone, in a medieval style called Gothic Revival, and Pip loved it. He loved how people fitted into the buildings and courtyards, and was inspired by the main architect here, Benjamin Mountford.
These are buildings that were built in the late part of the 19th century and was pretty seriously damaged during the earthquake, and you can hear now that work's going on repairing it. We're incredibly lucky to have it. You know, this is such a gem nationally. I mean, I headed north into lightweight timber country. But coming back here, I'm kind of rattled, really. I'm really thinking I should maybe rip up the return air ticket, you know, that I'm back here to draw and paint. As a student, my professor, he said architecture has nothing to do with buildings. It's all to do with the space between buildings. So that as you walk along a cloister, for example, the Capitol is just above eye height. You're really engaged in the carving of that Oamaru stone. And then the archways, similarly, incredibly low, that you can reach up and touch the top of the arch. It's the space between buildings and the transitions from inside to outside, from public space to private space. All of those things are the real meat of architecture, it seems to me.
The importance of connecting public and private spaces is a lesson that Pip has never forgotten. He still uses these Gothic influences as one way to solve modern-day design challenges. One of the most pressing is how we can house more people in smaller spaces. Of course, poorly designed medium to high density housing can be a recipe for disaster, but the second of Pip's 3 favourite New Zealand houses he's taken me to has proved a great success.
This is St Mary's, a really interesting group of townhouses and apartments done by Peter Bevan about 1999. Really interesting example of medium high density housing built around interlinked courtyards. We should go and have a look.
Love to.
Yeah.
Lead the way.
Okay.
Architect Peter Bevan cut quite a dash in Christchurch. He was passionate, articulate, and often controversial, and he loved the Gothic revival style of the city's early buildings. Peter not only designed St Mary's, he lived here too.
Ah, I see.
It's a great medieval entry, isn't it? Comes from a tradition of the Anglican churchyards, you know, the little shelter.
So a gatehouse.
Yeah, gatehouse.
So in the medieval days, that would have been somebody standing up there with a pot of oil if they didn't want you
That's
and
right.
they'd pour it on you. So if you got stuck at the gate, you were toast.
Right.
So this is the sort of common courtyard.
We'd call it semi-public open space. You know, that it's not open to the street, but it's open to all of the buildings here. It's a focus for them. And practically, it's to do with getting to your apartments. We've come in off the public street, through the lich gate, through the courtyard, and now we're coming up the stair. And so it's a progression from public space of the street into increasingly private space.
You feel like you could open the doors in the morning and
That's right.
have a cup of tea and have a wee chat.
That's right.
And then by the same token, if you didn't get on with your neighbours, it's real easy, you just shut your door.
And it all works, of course, because the cars are buried a couple of floors below.
Right.
Cars have been left behind, so we're in a pedestrian zone.
Yeah.
Because the cars just wreck the suburbs.
That's
And
right.
it's the intimacy of this which is really exciting, I reckon.
I know for many people, me included, the whole Gothic thing is perhaps a little bleak, so I'm hoping St Mary's warms up when we get inside.
Well, I'll tell you what, Pip, it's light. It's very hard, all the materials. It's exposed concrete, the wrought iron, timber. I would describe this as like minimalist.
Modern.
Modern.
Well, old-fashioned modern.
Oh, old-fashioned modern.
Old-fashioned modern.
Oh, is that an oxymoron?
Well, that's nicely put. As a block, I think it's a really interesting model of medium-density housing, and a very early model of that, really. It grows out of that great history of Christchurch architecture that had Mountford and those sort of guys building in the Arts Centre. And then Peter Bevan, who did this building, absolutely engaged in that. I mean, he felt himself completely of that tradition. And so this building, in many ways, carries on that tradition. What it exhibits is a really interesting transition from public space to private space in a very condensed realm. The fact that we're up here and this building, we're looking out there and there are the rooftops, that there's trees out here, that it's just, it kind of breathes the humanity which I really respond to. It's not Paris, but you could
be.
It makes a connection, you know?
Yeah.
It offers you more than just the bricks and mortar.
Yes.
The mind is able to travel. And the window by the kitchen, if you go over there, you can stand there, you're kind of making the evening meal, but your eye is out to the beyond.
And that, to me, is the essence here. Life is not lived in little boxes. There is life beyond four walls. Good architecture looks after people. Peter Bevan understood that, and so does Pip. I just wonder what more he has to show me.
Now, I haven't known Pip Cheshire long, but right from the get-go, he's challenged the way I think and feel about architecture, about our public spaces, and about what the future of high-density housing in New Zealand just might be. Now, Pip's got plenty more to show me, and we'll see that coming up. But right now, my question is there any limit to this guy's talents? Well, apparently not.
From university buildings and marine reserves, to commercial space, restaurants, retail spaces, and even huts in Antarctica, Pip's range is off the chart. No surprise then that he's attracted the attention of some very high-rolling clients from overseas. The Tara Iti Golf Club in Mangawhai in Northland is modelled on the private golf clubs of the United States. And yes, it is more than a bit exclusive, and when a couple from Los Angeles decided to build a house here, Pip was at the top of their list to create their vision, a holiday haven in paradise.
The horizon is just spread out in front of you. The revelation of Little Barrier, the hen and chickens out here, the lynx are here, the coastal edge, the dune country just rolls up, and then this platform sitting in here. So you wake up in the morning, the sun is coming up, and the day is here. The plans for the day can be made.
With his passion for surf, sky and sand, plus his deep understanding of architectural history, Pip was the ideal person to take this project on. And what he has created, with the help of exceptional Kiwi craftsmanship, is a top-end glass pavilion anchored with a touch of genius.
Pretty early on, there was a question about how does one build in the dunes? What might living here be like, or what might the buildings be like? And I did a series of sketches that explored pavilions, and in particular, the sort of glass box, of which, you know, it's a strong architectural tradition. Mies van der Rohe's Farnsworth House, Philip Johnson's Glass House, and so forth.
The house at Taraiti may well reflect Pip's respect for those other famous glass pavilions, but of course, he's added his own unique twist, the cones.
I was interested in these things being seen as kind of pegs anchoring this glass box to the side. So they're like tent pegs, you know, when you see it from afar. And allow the pavilion to flow around so that the public and even the semi-private spaces, bedrooms, would somehow be seen as a continuum. It's a plan, it's just 4 glass walls with 3 cones in them. But actually, in order to make it that simple and to be able to meet the needs or the demands of 21st century occupants and long-term repairs and maintenance, it just takes forever. You know, these are extraordinary undertakings. This cone here is much more complex. It's got the kitchen, obviously, here, and then tucked in behind that is scullery, laundry, and then beyond that again, bathroom. The relationship here is incredibly important with the links out here and the fact that you see up to the headlands up here and then the offshore islands here, you know, while you're making a salad and so forth. One of the other things that the cones do, of course, is to mediate the space through here. And so you think about exactly how wide should it be that it's comfortable to come in here. But the other thing it does is just break that zone between public space, private space. It just does it, you know, incredibly gently. The symbol of it, of course, is this beautiful tapered door here that just reminds you again of the geometry. The really small gesture that plays up the geometry of this and then just shuts the space down.
Living in a glass house, even if the only people looking in are the golfers on the links below, may well present some issues of privacy. But as Pip says, the private spaces are contained in the cones. As for the rest, well, it's not as if you're living here full time.
I don't think you build a glass box if you want to have a private life. These lives are lived out here on this hillside, and they're not to do with retreat and withdrawal. You're at the beach, you're on holiday. This is not the modified environment of home.
On a trip to LA before the build, Pip talked about his design ideas with his clients. They bought into the cones and the glass, and they were impressed with how intimately Pip knew this coastline, but he also had to ease their fears about the local wildlife.
They were concerned about bugs and serpents and four-legged beasties and two-legged beasties. And you know, in the end, I had to say, look, I've surfed this coast a bit. And I've stayed over and I've just crawled into my surfboard bag and probably on your side, you know, the point was made that New Zealand's a pretty benign environment.
It was an exacting build, of course, but in the end, it was perfect. Perched above the greens, with views forever, the clients were thrilled. Everyone involved in this project delivered big time, marshalled by an architect who understood and respected the site and was determined to achieve the extraordinary.
You know, it's one of those great lines about architects should be able to deliver more than you dream possible. And in that case, I'd like to think we did.
For the third of his 3 favourite New Zealand houses, Pip Cheshire's taken me back to central Auckland, to a property he believes points an important way to the future, upwards.
What we're seeing here in Whare Mahanga is a really interesting prototypical example of how we might achieve a medium-high density in an inner city site. They're terrace housing, they share elements, like they share this entryway, they share this forecourt here, but then when you go into the house, it's left and right into completely private zones.
Yes.
They were designed by 2 women who were in the same year at architecture school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Jane Amer and Lindley Naismith. And they worked together, and then they negotiated the design of this building between them. And I'm going to be really interested to understand the process of doing that. So, you know, there's quite a lot going on in this building.
Oh, I'm excited. Let's get in there, have a look.
I reckon.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
I'm thinking this living situation could be a little odd. I mean, let's face it, 2 friends working together, designing together, building together, and then living every single day side by side could be just too much togetherness. I'm wondering how that works for them all.
Oh, wow. Holy. Isn't this magnificent?
It's a great space, isn't it? The lovely mystery of the stair just winding its way out. But then the shutters.
Yeah.
And that allows you to shut that room off and have a kind of private zone in there.
Yeah.
Or you keep it open and you're part of the sort of family leading out into the garden out here. So you have this incredibly rich range of experiences possible in a very small area.
Yeah, this is a lovely room too, isn't it?
All of that end is a bay that just hangs out over the pavement.
Yes.
So you have that lovely relationship with the pavement if you want to. If you see a friend, you open the door, you say, hey, come on up. Environmentally, it's very cunning too, because it's using this void in the middle as the device around which the house rotates. So circulation's going around it, but also you see the bank of louvers there, just allowing air to move through the house.
But also, as you go up, I'm noticing it gets lighter and lighter as you go up. So,
yeah.
And more
Exactly.
private.
Yeah.
The stairs are used to diagonally connect bedrooms, bathrooms and balconies. But like Pip says, they sort of tease you on.
They're like little half flights, so
That's right.
it's not too arduous.
No, that's
so
right,
even if you're
exactly.
even
The
if you're older people like us, you can still sort of move around. It's like it's not daunting. Is
No,
it?
no, and that's arising out of the natural topography of the site they've used. But as we increase, you know, as we go up, we're getting into an increasingly private zone.
The first of these twin houses is very private. I really wasn't expecting that. Standing out front, I thought they'd be in each other's faces, but that wasn't the case. And the design is terrific. I could easily live here, but I'm wondering if the other one is as good.
Okay, number 2.
Yeah. Okay.
Wow, this is cool too. This is completely different, right? They're obviously big entertainers.
You betcha.
Yeah, and
this is a great focus of it.
yeah.
So people gathered around here, or the dining table, or spilling outside into the courtyard.
It's a completely different feel altogether,
Yeah.
right?
Jane and Lindley may have designed and built these houses together, but they have completely different ideas about layout and the organisation of their lives inside.
This is very different as well. Remember on the other side they had the...
That's right, much more contained.
The shutters and all that sort of thing.
Right. So here it's much more continuous flow.
Yeah.
At the rear of their sections, each house contains a garden and an outdoor gathering point, and I've spied a double gate.
I'm pretty excited to look at this because I think if I'm right, this will slide, and it does.
Yeah, but the neighbours got to want to do it too.
Yeah, look at that. Isn't that cool? So if you were having a good old shindig, it'd be mean, wouldn't it?
It is. I can tell you from experience, it is fantastic.
Yeah.
So while the families often gather in the gardens, there's another communal space too, right at the top of Whare Mahanga, where the twin houses come together again.
Look at that. Wow. And it's like it's a 360-degree view, pretty much. Well, it is.
Yeah. So you start out with 2 houses, 2 entries, you go into the sort of private realm, up through the private realm, and then come back into the shared space, and then the shared space of the city.
You know, they can be separate from one another,
Well,
private from one another.
Exactly.
It's a genius design.
It's
Isn't
very,
it?
very good.
The design is also a triumph of collaboration. 2 good friends and experienced architects working together with a clear sense of purpose.
We just think the terrace houses, it's the way of the future for Auckland, really. We feel that that's the way to get increased density. The bad side of a terrace house is it gets really dark in the middle. So by pulling it apart and getting that kind of light-filled volume, we felt we were getting light through the sort of guts of the thing.
So did you have to subdivide the land in order to build?
We didn't have to, but we did.
Taking a piece of land and subdividing it was worthwhile. I mean, you end up with 2 pieces of land that aren't that dissimilar to the original value.
And also just with the terrace house typology, because it's just a very plain rectilinear building. It's got a front and a back, 2 sides which have got very little detail to them at all.
Yes.
So it's much cheaper than your classic architect-designed house. This is very compact.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
I really do believe that Lindley and Jane are understating the cleverness of the design here. After all, they've doubled the land use and turned it into something really beautiful and very desirable while actually reducing their footprint.
There's a lot of lessons in this house. Here there would have been 1 single family living on the site. Now there's 2 families in a much more complex kind of relationship. And so there's all sorts of lessons in here that we've got to apply across the city to allow people to have moments of privacy, moments of relationship with the street, moments of relationship with the wider surroundings, but all of those things being played out. These are the issues that we've got to deal with in the city, as we get more dense.
PIP Cheshire has built cities, towns and businesses, won numerous awards, inspired hundreds of students and thrilled his clients. But what about the man himself? Is he satisfied?
I want better. Yeah, more, bigger, better.
Yeah.
I think that we do have an incredibly good collection of private houses. Our architects are very good at that. I think the big challenge is the public open space and the big urban buildings.
Yes.
Getting those to be as clear about where they come from. So that, one might look at a building and say, I'm not sure why, but this is something to do with Aotearoa Ride.
Spot on. Well, Pip, it's been a real privilege for me to get to know you, to travel around the country and see the stuff that you've done. So I just wanted to say thanks.
Oh, thank you. That's very gracious. I'm overwhelmed by it.
But it's true.
Thank you for that. I'm honoured by that.